Okay. All right, we're gonna.
Good.
All right, we're gonna get started. Sorry for the delay. We're gonna go ahead and feel free to still get, breakfast and coffee. We're gonna keep this very casual. I'm glad I'm among friends because it's been a little stressful morning. So use the sweats and the nerves, but thank you for coming, and we're going to have a really, I think, good presentation. We'll shut doors and stuff here in a second. Just a little housekeeping. So there's bathrooms out this door and out this door. We do have Cassie here who has graciously volunteered to do chair massages because one of our themes is self-care for this. So we have a sign up, and it's just kind of first come, first serve, 10 minutes, and she's going to be there, so you're not going to miss out, but you can get a little relaxation. So we'll just kind of, I'm not sure, we might just announce names, like head back when it's your turn. We're going to, again, continental breakfast open until we switch to lunch. We're going to have Cafe Rio is catering, so we'll have a taco bar set up, and that should be yummy. So I apologize we didn't have the slide. I want to make a huge thank you to all of our vendors. So they really allow this to happen. They're kind of help provide a lot of the funding. So as you're going through the vendors saying hi, tell them thank you, and I'll make it a list of a name later once maybe my computer works. So we'll get started. I'm going to go ahead and have the foundation representative talk about foundation things, because there's a lot besides Great Strides, and if you've never participated in the foundation activities, I highly recommend it, and then we'll move on.
I think I've met a lot of you so far this morning, but my name's Anna. I work for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. I'm based out of Seattle, but I'm lucky enough to work with the wonderful families and staff in Spokane here. So as she mentioned, we have the walk coming up on June 2nd. We would love to see all of you guys there. It's a really fun, wonderful, lovely walk. We always have good weather. And that is a great day, but also Foundation has a ton of programs, and they're kind of starting new ones for folks living with CF. So the biggie is the Compass program, which is our kind of patient assistance program, and they really want to help with anything that is a barrier to health in your life. So, you know, whether that's logistical or transportation or insurance, legal problems, please do reach out to them, and they will work very hard and do their darndest to find an answer or help you and connect you with them. So make sure you check that out. We also have new initiatives like our CF Peer Connect, where we kind of like a peer-to-peer mentoring program where people going through different life stages, whether it's adulthood or college, or, you know, starting to think about having a family or working, they connect you with someone who's either just gone through that or is going through that, just so that you can kind of virtually connect via phone or email and just talk to someone else who's gone through it and has CF. So that's a good one. We have a lot of advocacy efforts that are ramping up, and it's really important. So please let me know afterwards or during it if you have any questions about those, or you can check out cff.org. But there's a lot of really cool things. All for
Thank you. So thank you, Anna, for that, and a few more housekeeping. So we have had some really amazing opportunity for the door prizes. We have several gift cards, massages, and other things to either pamper, enjoy yourself. So everyone should have gotten 4 tickets and put wherever you want. A little bit about it, we're only going to do 1 prize per person, though, even though you have 4 tickets. It just gives you more chance. And we will have, for some of the online people, I have to remember we're recording. So if there's people online, we will also draw their names as well. And then we're not going to take, because we're a little behind as far as bathroom breaks, between speakers, we'll definitely have a little break, but in the middle, feel free. Again, we're going to keep this pretty informal. And I encourage you, since I forgot name tags and the post-it may not stick, please introduce yourself to each other and find out, you know, how CF affects your life, and, you know, find peers and mentors and, you know, friends that can help you through this crazy life. So we're going to start out with Judy and Oscar. They're going to be talking about nutrition and social issues around nutrition.
Good morning, everybody. I think you can probably all hear me. I have a pretty loud voice, but let me know if you can't. This is going to be a rather casual beginning. We're all kind of settling in, and hopefully the coffee's going to kick in. You're going to hear all the good stuff in the next few talks, but I was given the topic of nutrition for a lifetime. So when I sat down to do this, I thought, wow, that is a huge subject. How am I going to possibly focus for my 15 minutes on nutrition? And got to thinking about it and see if I can do the slides. Okay, which way am I going? There we go. And these are some of the things that came to mind. And I thought, well, how do I pick from that? And I couldn't. And so, again, just sitting there thinking, how am I going to do this? I thought, well, what is nutrition? Why? I mean, why make decisions? It's a whole lot easier maybe to just run through the drive-in or order some food in and not think about it, get our meal done, and go on with our life. And so, whoops, the wrong way, sorry. I decided that I would invite a good friend of mine, Mr. Webster, to help me out and try to come up with an idea of what I could talk about. And I looked up the definition for nutrition, and it was extremely boring, even to me, and that's my passion. So I thought, we're not going to go there. But then I got to thinking about it, and what is nutrition for? Well, it's to nourish us, or it's nourishment, or that sort of thing. And I thought, great, let's go with that. So this is what I found from my friend, Mr. Webster. And before we actually go through this, I have a little story to tell. I did not look this up on my computer or a hard dictionary. I looked it up on my little tiny phone screen. And if any of you are a fellow dyslexic out there, you'll realize that when you're trying to read something really little like that, it might not read too well. So that first synonym is aliment. It's not ailment, but my brain loves to play with letters, and it messes it up all the time. And so for me, it came out as ailment. And I thought, ailment? Okay, that kind of irritated me, because nutrition is my passion, and I don't think nutrition's an ailment. And then I got really irritated, and then I got downright angry. And I thought, how could they possibly say that? They didn't. I did. But I got to thinking about it, and I thought maybe in America, it actually is kind of an ailment. So, whoops, wrong way, sorry. I got to thinking about it. There's so many choices. There's so many things to get confused by. Maybe it is not a true ailment. It's not a true symptom of a disease, but it is kind of a problem, a big problem. How do you make choices? And I challenge you to go to a bookstore, go to the health aisle, pick up a book off the shelf, the furthest one to the left, the one in the middle, and the furthest one to the right. Lay them all out. And I will almost guarantee you that there is some truth in each one of those books. The premise probably has some good science behind it. But when you get to the middle of the book, that's where it gets a little sketchy, because often it's a restriction, it's a huge change from what you're used to eating, and there may not be a whole lot of science behind it. When you get to the end of the book ends. Where do you go from there? What have you done in your lifestyle that may be positive? So I'm not saying that any of these things are wrong. I'm just saying that think about if it's really making you change something temporarily and not helping you to focus on nutrition for a lifetime. So let's get back to the synonyms, if I'm capable. Okay. So synonyms. I love synonyms. I have a 2-year-old granddaughter and a 6-year-old grandson. And if I haven't learned anything from them, is that the English language does not make any sense. And especially the 2-year-old is constantly saying what and why and what does that word mean. And I'm not a dumb person. I kind of know how to explain things. But for those kids, it's like, oh my gosh, you use the same word, nourishment, nourish, nutrition. They all sound the same. So I love synonyms. And I also love the dictionary, obviously. But the one that really struck me here, or the ones that really struck me here, are the last four: nurture, support, encourage, promote. Those are words that can relate to nutrition, but they can relate to our lifestyle too. We want to encourage our kids to be the healthiest. We want to promote good lifestyle, nutrition, exercise, and in the case of your children, doing the treatments and doing everything that can possibly be done to make sure that they stay as healthy as possible. So that's what I really liked about the synonyms. Okay, whoops, I wasn't supposed to show that, but you saw it. We're going to try a little experiment. I want you all to close your eyes. And as you know from the slide, you're going to get caught if you open them. I want you to think of your favorite. This is going to take a few minutes, so please don't fall asleep. Try to play along. Hopefully your caffeine's kicking in. I want you to imagine in your mind your most favorite hot meal. Now, this could be a holiday meal, maybe a Thanksgiving meal. It could be a birthday. It could be something as simple as a big pot of chili on the stove with some cornbread. Okay? Next, I want you to imagine walking up to the home that you know that this meal is being prepared in. You open the door. What's the first thing that happens? That smell. The smell of the food. It's like, oh my gosh. Well, we think that our stomach is where digestion and our appetite and all of that is centered. It's not. It's in the brain. So science has shown that that smell starts to send a cascade of hormones and chemicals into our body that prepare us for digestion. Keep your eyes closed. You walk into the kitchen and that person is there who is fixing the meal for you. Most likely, it's someone you know well, and you're happy to see them, and they're happy to see you. So the next thing that happens is there's a greeting. Maybe it's a hug. Maybe it's a hi, how you doing? Gosh, this smells great. But whatever it is, that sends more hormones, chemicals into your body, and those bring pleasure and delight and joy. Okay, so now, again, keeping your eyes closed, you're going to wander off. You're going to sit down at the table. You found your place. The food is placed up there. It looks great. You serve yourself a plate, and you take that first bite. That first bite is the delightful bite. But that first bite, you need to pay attention to. Is it salty? Is it sweet? Is it savory? Is it crunchy? Is it soft? Really pay attention to that first bite, because that is the beginning of mechanical digestion. You start chewing your food, starts mixing with saliva, which has enzymes, and all that digestion starts. Okay? If you rush through those first few bites, you're really missing out, or if you chew too fast or you swallow your food and you're not chewing, you're really missing on that mechanical digestion. Last thing, with your eyes closed, look around the table. There's family members maybe your kids are there. Listen to the conversations. What's going on? Listen to those conversations for just a second, and I'm going to be quiet for just a second. Just listen. What are you hearing? Open your eyes. Is this what you imagined? Is it peaceful and quiet and everybody's sitting in their place and the food is delightful? A side note, Norman Rockwell does not necessarily paint scenes or do scenes that he experienced. Instead, he does it the way he felt it should be. I think he has something going there, okay? Because really, for nutrition to work the way it should, this should be what it looks like. 3 times a day when we have our meals. And you're all going, you've got to be kidding me. There is no way. And you're right. There probably is no way for 3 meals a day. But there might be for 1. And that's kind of where I want to have you maybe start thinking and maybe start working on at home. And I know in my home, if I were listening to the conversations, the kids would probably be whining about the fact that there was green beans and they don't like them. And potentially the adults, including myself, would be dissecting our day. And, usually I hit the bad points and not the good points. And so what's happening then? What's happening to all those chemicals in our body that's helping us to absorb the nutrition that we have so carefully chosen? We know that we need our fruits and vegetables. We know that we need to have protein and carbohydrate and fat at every meal. We know all of that. I've kind of pounded it into your head, so I know you all know that. But what's happening to that nutrition in us biochemically, chemistry-wise, if that table is chaotic? Well, let me tell you, what happens if we're doing good digestion? Our body moves the majority of our blood to our stomachs or to our digestive tract, because blood is essentially how we get the nutrients spread around our body to do their work. If there's chaos, if there's the grown-ups are not paying attention to the kids are whining, one kid doesn't want to sit still, keeps running off, whatever it is, a whole different set of hormones come along, or chemicals come along, and you'll recognize them as the fight or flight, okay? And fight or flight affects a different part of our body. It sends that blood back out to our arms, our legs, our lungs, our heart, because we're either going to have to duke it out or we're going to run. Now, it doesn't usually get that bad at a dinner table, but that's what our body doesn't understand. Our body doesn't get quite what's going on, so we don't want those fight or flight chemicals at a table. So the thing is, I could talk about this for hours, and we don't have hours. But I want to let you know I'm available. Every Friday at the clinic, I'm available for you to come in, and we can look at your family lifestyle, what's going on in your family, and specifically work toward having a good, at least one good meal time where digestion works to its best. But it has to do with being mindful. And mindful is one of those buzzwords. Again, you can probably go to the next section over in the bookstore under the psychology part and find that whole row of mindfulness stuff, and the books aren't going to agree with each other. But when I use it, it just means for me to be present in the moment. And we need to be present in the moment at the dinner table. And how do we deal with the little one who's yelling about the green beans, or the one that won't sit still, or the spouse who's downloading all the bad things that happened for the day? We do that before the meal or after the meal. We do a lot of teaching with our little ones in play, and how to maybe between school and dinner time, a way for them to talk about what's going on in their lives. Maybe make an agreement with your significant other to talk in the evening after the meal, that sort of thing. So the mindfulness part of it is very important. And again, I can certainly help you with that. So, sidelight again, I have a college roommate, and you would mostly say that she has a green thumb, but I think she's got magic. Her houseplants, her yard, her vegetables, my gosh, her vegetables are huge. But she talks to her plants. I mean, she goes out there and she talks to them and she tells them, thank you for growing. And okay, not very scientific, although there are some scientists who are trying to see if it actually works. But if speaking kindly to plants helps them grow, imagine what speaking kindly to one another can do. Gets rid of those fight or flight hormones, gets rid of that stress, promotes the healthy. So we started out with nutrition for a lifetime, but I'd rather call it nutrition is a lifestyle. And we're all working on our lifestyle. It's not something you do overnight. It's a long-term thing. All right, that's it. And Amy are going to come up and kind of make it a little bit easier for you to figure out how to get all those veggies.
Good morning. My name is Amy and I'm the social work intern working with Oscar at the clinic. So I've met some of you and maybe not all of you, but excited to be here today. So we're going to talk about local food resources in your community that can help you get that nutrition that Judy was just talking about for you and your family. Okay, so food stamps. Those can be a really big resource, and it's something that I want to talk about on eligibility and how to apply. So for Washington residents, this is just take a look at this graph. It's kind of the income of what you need, the maximum income that you need to make to qualify for food stamps. So that might be some of you, it might not be. So if you fall in that bracket and you're not already receiving food stamps, it might be something to look into. You can apply online or over the phone. So it's got a couple ways to do it, or you can go to your local DSHS office to apply. For Idaho, if we have any Idahoans out here, the same graph shows for monthly, or this is per year income, so it's a little bit more different than the Washington graph. As well, you can apply online, over the phone, or at the local office. Yes. It's gross. Thank you. Okay, and then I know we've got Montana people as well. So this is gross income for Montana. So just take a look at that. If you're from Montana, you might be able to qualify. And again, online, over the phone, or you can go to a local office. So there's that. Hopefully you had a chance. And if you wanted to talk to us after or in between, just let us know and we can help you more out with that.
So one of the things too that we're trying to do, especially with our young adults, is try to get them enrolled. If they're in college, they're definitely eligible. I know I used it when I was in college. I had the gold meal plan. Actually, it was the platinum meal plan and the food stamps. And it helped out a lot because it just helped me buy extra snacks, get extra hydration, all these other things. So if your kids are in college, let's sign them up.
Yeah.
All right, so another local place that we can get good nutrition food is our local farmers market. I'm going to give you guys 5 top reasons to shop at a farmers market. So as you guys can see, fruits and vegetables that we buy at a farmers market are the freshest and tastiest available. Fruits are allowed to ripen in the field and are brought directly to you. No long distance shipping, no gassing to stimulate the ripening process, no sitting for weeks in storage. This food is as real as it gets. It's fresh from the farm. Here in Spokane, we have Green Bluff. It's a beautiful place. So if you guys have a chance while you guys are here checking out our clinic springtime, check out Green Bluff. I mean, there's tons of acres and just tons of farms, and it's just really good, juicy food. It's awesome. I love Green Bluff. Another one is because we need to nourish ourselves. It's a good nutritional way to get food that is not so highly processed. A lot of it does not use pesticides, hormones, antibiotics, and genetic modification. Most of it is irradiated, wax, or gas in transit. These products may have a negative effect on human health. In contrast, most food found at the farmers market are minimally processed, and many of the farmers go to great lengths to grow the most nutritious produce possibly by using sustainable techniques. So they don't use a whole lot of pesticides, chemicals, all the other things. It's really, a lot of it's just organic. Like if you guys go to a farmer's market, you'll see half of it is probably organic. A little bit more expensive, but I guarantee you it's worth spending that extra 20 cents or 30 cents per item. And then also we just know where our food is where it's from. A lot of it, it's sourced here locally or in your guys' city. On average, as I was reading articles on this, they're saying that food on average travels about 1,500 miles to get to your plate. So I've seen stuff from like Mexico, all these other places, and yeah, just imagine all those gases being in the storage containers, how many different people have handled it. I mean, just you can name it, right? There's a whole bunch of things. So know that it's a lot of the food at the farmers market is local. And then number 4 is discover the spice of life, which is having different options, variety. I don't know if you guys have ever been to, I'm sure you guys have, but you can find like red carrots, you can find purple green beans, purple cauliflower. I mean, it's just like a ton of stuff. Quail eggs, a lot of good stuff that you don't usually find, at local stores here. So when you guys can check out, try to grab different foods there. And then, of course, one of the main important things for me is EBT cards are accepted at farmers market. And then most of the time, a lot of these vendors, they'll actually match up to $15 per purchase. So if you spend $15, you'll get $15 free at the farmers market. Another place to get good food at is church. For those of you guys who are religious, I'm sure there are options for potlucks, food pantries. Sometimes they have food pantries out there. You can talk to your local minister, let them know what your guys' needs are, and I'm sure they would be willing to help you guys out. Another important thing is fellowship after church. So I know when I was younger, I used to always go to people's houses right after church. It was just a great experience. A lot of time they had tons of food. So I just really, if you guys are going to church, I really challenge you guys to go and spend time with other family members. And it's just most importantly, it's one of their mission. So I found a famous quote here. For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was naked and you gave me clothing. So really just church is just a place to go and get your guys' needs if you guys are religious or attend church. Another local area here, or a program, is Meals for Wheels. And this typically comes through referral from me or Judy. But this program is really cool. And this is here in Spokane. I know not everyone here is from Spokane, but there may be some of their programs there in you guys' area. Now, what Meals on Wheels is, it's a program that provides frozen meals. Actually, let me pull this stuff up. So this program delivers 7 frozen entrees once a week for 3% of monthly income. So they come out personally to your house and they just deliver the food. And usually it's about a week worth at a time. And on average, it's about 70 cents per meal. So about $21, you guys are getting 30 meals, which I think is pretty awesome. But please note, no salt is added. So make sure to add tons of salt because they need it. And then also available for purchase, they have cases of Ensure and Ensure Plus. It's reasonable, $17.50. So when you guys can, and if you guys think you're eligible for it, please let us know, and we'll definitely try to get that process going. Most importantly, it can also be paid by food stamps. And then family and friends. You guys are, I think, one of the most important people to get food from. You guys can have barbecues, celebrations, family gatherings. It's kind of sad. So I was thinking about this last night at 3 a.m. When I finished the slides. But I was like, man, my dad lives 2 hours away, and I haven't seen him in 4 months. I was like, that is so sad because that's, usually when I go to my dad's, we have barbecues, and we just have tons of food. It's like this huge celebration. But I don't do that as often as I should. So I'm going to challenge myself, and I'm going to challenge you guys for this year to have more family gatherings, go and barbecue a little bit more, go to dinner, go and hang out. Even if it's something small, go and order a $10 pizza or whatever it may be. So I just think you guys are really important. I know family's really important to me. And so it's going to challenge you guys to invite more people, more friends, have a celebration. Another cool program, I'm sure you guys are well aware of the Healthwell Foundation. There is 2 grants available. There's that Cystic Fibrosis Treatment Fund, which helps cover co-payments for medications. You just got to hold on to the receipt, send the reimbursement form, ship it out to them. And if you guys need more information on that, please feel free to let us know. And then the Vitamin Supplemental Grant, which is, I think, one of the most important ones, too. It's for $2,000. and that's per year. So that averages out to, I think, $225 per month. My calculations could be wrong, but that's about $200 around there. But what this does, this helps buy extra vitamins and supplements. So anytime you guys purchase something on the list that me and Judy can give you, you hold on to that receipt, send it off to the Healthful Foundation, and they will reimburse you guys. So just remember, that's up to $200 per month, which is quite a bit, and it's free money. So make sure to utilize that. And I really got to touch on this because I was actually looking at our list, and I see a lot of inactive ones and just ones that are just not really as used as much as I think we can be using them. So again, I'm going to challenge you guys to really, really use the Healthful Foundation. I think it's an important piece. It's free money. All right, so one of the things too that I'm currently working on in my house is we're building a garden. It's springtime. For some of us, we do have a little bit of land, or you can easily just plant a couple pots outside and get some tomatoes growing. Easy things to do is just, start buying garden materials, start buying the seeds, the pots, soil, gloves. After your garden is prepped, please feel free to plant away. And by the time you know it, you'll start harvesting. And then you can share that stuff. Share it with your kids, share it with family members, share it with everybody. And I thought this was a really cool quote here that we have. So it says, if we can get people to focus on fruits and vegetables and more, healthy foods will be better in terms of our healthcare situation, which is true. If we just eat healthier, we'll just be healthier.
And then the last thing that I wanted to touch on was the food banks. So just to research in your community, I know we're all from different spots, but just so you know, Spokane has approximately 12 food banks. Tri-Cities has about 4, and Coeur d'Alene has about 7. So a lot of them you'll have to schedule an appointment. Some may be walk-in, and you'll need license or identification and proof of address because some only serve different zip codes. So some of them you can come in like once a month. Some of them you can come in once a week. It just really depends on the food bank. But I just wanted to bring to your attention that that resource is available in your community.
And what I found interesting about that is a lot of it, I know we went on to the memes here, but on the food banks, some of them don't ask for your income. I've actually seen people on like Hummers and Mercedes go and get food, but you don't know their situation. So if you guys do need it and you guys are okay financially, just make sure to tap into those resources. It's just extra food. You guys can stock it, save it for later. Now into the memes and quotes here that I found pretty cool. So eat less sugar, you're already sweet enough. And then here's another one. Bikini season is right around the corner. Unfortunately, so is the pizza. So just remember to eat to nourish your body. We need it for nutrition, extra vitamins. So just something to keep in mind. Greatest wealth is health. And to keep the body in a good health is a duty. Otherwise, we should not be able to keep our minds strong and clear. That's Mr. Buddha. Lastly, it just keeps us all healthy, including yourself. So just make sure you guys are healthy, because then our families will be healthy as well. Thanks, you guys.
All right, thank you for that. We have some other space by table, so if you want to sit at a table, feel free to do that while we do our transition here. And for those who didn't know, we have bathrooms on out all the doors essentially, and just feel free to come and go as you need. We're again keeping this informal. We're all friends. So now we have Dr. McCarthy is going to come talk about. We always like to have him do kind of a basics of CF. We have families that this is their first time at an event. And frankly, it doesn't matter how many times I hear things like this, I learn things. So we think it's a really valuable.
Oh, I see.
And then just up and down.
Here's that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so just kind of stand still and don't move. Okay, good morning. Thank you all for coming. This is always a really wonderful event. I look forward to it, although I do have to say, I always like to start with something kind of funny, and I was struggling with my slides this week, and I couldn't come up with anything funny, so I came up with something hopefully a little more inspirational. And started on the movement of these slides. Oops. Did that do anything? Oh, there we go. So I've been thinking a lot this year. I always think a lot about this, but this year in particular, CF is getting as it gets more and more exciting, it's also getting more and more complicated. Medicines we have, the gene modulators I'm going to talk about, the antibiotics, lung transplants, so on and so forth. It gets increasingly difficult to keep up with what's going on. And that's a wonderful, it's a double-edged sword. It's a wonderful blessing and it's a difficulty. And I think teamwork has never been more important than it is now. And I just feel so grateful to my small team, our small and growing CF team. And I also consider all of our families and patients to be part of our team too. And then you get expanded to the nation and so on as well. But just as I was preparing this, I was really thinking about, and I think both of these are very, very inspirational and just say so much about what it is to be a member of a team and to have a team. And then as I was driving out the freeway today and trying to remember which exit do you take to get to the Providence, I thought, oh, Providence. I really should have thrown Providence in on this too, because Providence has been a tremendous resource for us. I mean, look at the room we're in today, look at the clinic we have and all the support that we have from them, and they are part of our team as well. So I'm very appreciative of you all for being here. Okay, so let's see. Oh, yes, good. Okay, don't even know my talk. Good news. I like to review certain things that have happened in the year since I last spoke. And a few exciting things have happened. We had one more birth. Last year we had, I think it was 4 births, but one was a set of triplets, so that was kind of cheating. This year, 1 birth, a nice healthy baby boy. We had 1 new lung transplant. The next 2 lines I may not be up to date. I just keep taking the old slide and adding a year, but if somebody knows of somebody that's even longer than this, I don't mean to discount somebody, but at least 1 lung transplant, one of our lung transplant patients is now celebrating 11th anniversary, 1 a 6th anniversary. Our oldest patient turned 65 this year. Still looking young. And our percentage of patients who are adults is around 50%, somewhere in that ballpark. So, in addition, some other things that have happened in our clinic, we completed our participation in the multi-center trial for Symdeko, a new gene modulator drug. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. We are just starting under Dr. Chavez's leadership, a new set of trials called the next generation modulator trials. I'll talk about those a little bit. Kalydeco, the first gene modulator that was approved for treatment in CF, was approved sometime during this last 12 months for use in the 2 to 5-year-olds. So we expanded it from initially 12 and over, then 6 and over, and now 2 to 5-year-olds. So we've been able to prescribe that. We have a brand new provider, Dr. Allison Lambert, sitting right here, and very excited to have her. She is an adult pulmonologist, and we are continuing to work on enhancing the adult side of our program, and I think you'll find her wonderful, both as a speaker today and as a clinician for those of you who end up seeing her. And we've also, and I was hoping to say more about this last one, but it's kind of coming along slowly, so I can't really say much about it. But we've sort of been brainstorming. I think a lot of people know that it's difficult to find primary care providers for our CF patients. Either primary care providers, in some cases, might be nervous about dealing with somebody who has a complex problem like CF. Or they say, fine, we'll see you, but then as soon as any problem comes up, they say, well, that doesn't have anything to do, you better talk to your CF clinic. And to have a really good working relationship with a group of primary care providers in the community who are not necessarily going to take care of the CF, but have a background knowledge about CF so that they can use their non-CF knowledge, and it just makes their medical care better and makes our medical care better. And I think we have come up with a good idea, but it's not ready for prime time. So hopefully within the next year we'll have something to offer. And we've also identified, as time goes on, various people are retiring from the medical community, other people coming in, and we've been able to identify a few primary care providers, particularly for the adult population, that seem to have a strong interest in CF, and our patients are liking them, which is nice. So we're working on that informally, but to have kind of a formal deal, I think would be really cool. Okay. Broader, good news from all over the U.S. At the CF conference this year, they announced that median life expectancy has now jumped to age 47 from somewhere in the low 40s. And I don't want to say too much about this because it's a complicated topic and I don't understand it. But there's some question about the exact nature of this statistic and how they arrive at it and so on, and they themselves kind of acknowledge, well, that's pretty amazing to go from 42 to 47 in 1 year. And one reason I mention that is I wouldn't be shocked totally if next year the figure is 45 or something like that, because there are sort of statistical variations from time to time. But the underlying point is still really valid and really cool, and that is that we're just seeing this exponential increase in life expectancy as everybody is working together as a team to take care of themselves and to take care of each other. And there is that now expectation that these gene modulator drugs, again starting with Kalydeco as the first one, will in the not too distant future be available for at least 90% of all CF patients with variable efficacy. But it's just, that is another area that has expanded tremendously. Okay. This is going to be a very brief, this is not going to be a whole overview of CF, it's just too much, but it's really, I think, necessary if you're going to do something like this, a little review of what is CF. You really have to target it more and more towards understanding the genetics of CF, because that's where the big exciting advances are coming, but not the only advances, and I'll talk about some non-genetic things a little bit later on. But please do interrupt any time, because I can just go on talking forever. And also, Kendra, let me know as I'm running out of time, because I'm not watching the clock. Okay, I think everybody knows. Okay, good. This slide on my phone got cut off about the last two words, but basically, everybody knows some of this stuff. A lot of people know a lot of this stuff. So I'll just sort of mix it up and interrupt if it's not clear. Cystic fibrosis is a genetic disease. It's the kind of genetic disease in which is called recessive, where you have to inherit one gene from each parent. And if you just inherit one gene, say from your mother, not your father, then you're a carrier of the gene, but you don't have CF. So you have to have two genes that come together. It's a common mutation in the general population. About 1 in 25 to 1 in 30 people carry a CF gene. Nobody really knows why. When there's that common of a gene mutation, a lot of times in other disease models that we know about, there's actually an advantage to carrying one abnormal gene like this. It makes you stronger against some other kind of disease. In CF, they've looked and looked and looked and looked, and they've found some intriguing possibilities. But the basic bottom line is that people don't know they're a carrier at all, because they don't have any health problems associated with it, and they don't have any Superman powers either associated with it. They just carry this silent gene for the most part. That gene, oh, is there a pointer, Kendra? Allison? Alma? Or do we just, I think I can actually just, oh, except I can't move.
Here, just.
Oh, okay.
Then the red.
So like if I was good with the mouse, I could do it. Okay. So the abnormal gene, one from each parent, creates a defective gene product, and that gene product is CFTR. And what that means is we have to step aside for a minute, and this is picture. Someday I should probably change this picture. It's not that great, but if you explain it, it is. So up here is Can I just step away? I guess that'll goof up the anyway, up here is supposed to be, that's a bronchial tube. So above these tube-like cells, that's a bronchial tube. And there's supposed to be, this is the normal situation, there's supposed to be thin liquid, just a thin layer of liquid that has various purposes in the bronchial tube. In the normal situation, there are these cells that are right on the edge of the bronchial tube, they line the bronchial tube, and there are channels right at the top of the membrane of these cells that serve to, various things can go through. And when we're talking cystic fibrosis, we're talking about this chloride channel. Chloride can freely go through this channel, and when chloride goes through it, sodium, the other part of the equation, tends to stay out. So you end up with sodium and chloride out in the bronchial tube, and that pulls water out of the bronchial tube, out of the cells, and makes nice thin secretions right in the bronchial tube. In normal acting milieu for everything that goes on in your airways. In the cystic fibrosis situation, this particular chloride channel is goofed up in one way or another, and therefore chloride, you can see this little chloride, doesn't get out of the cell into the bronchial tube. It sits inside the cell. Excess sodium comes into the cell as well, so you have a bunch of salt in your cell, not very much salt outside the cell. That pulls a bunch of water, just like putting salt on a slug. You pull a bunch of water into the cell. So basic bottom line is you have too much water in the cell and beyond the cell and inside the lung, and you have not enough water out in the bronchial tube. So you have thick, sticky secretions. Everybody here is totally familiar with. And that's the basic abnormality. So this CFTR is this chloride channel, which is abnormal in one way or another and results in decreased transport of the electrolytes. That in turn leads to thickened secretions, and there's the microscope slide over there. That big thing in the middle is a bronchial tube, and that should have air in it. It should be kind of all white like some of those other things, but instead there's a bunch of gunk in there, and that causes difficulties that, again, everybody here is totally familiar with. When you have bronchial obstruction like that, you end up getting infecting organisms in there. You get bronchitis or bronchiolitis if it's small airways. And the body fights infection by mounting a very complicated war, basically, against these bacteria, or it could be viruses or whatever. And the whole process of that war against these bacteria, let's say, is called inflammation. It's very complicated. It's white blood cells and antibodies and a whole bunch of other stuff. And inflammation is very good because it kills bacteria and prevents the infection from getting totally out of control. But just as any other kind of a war scene, there's a whole, like Syria right now maybe, there's a whole bunch of just explosions going on and so on and so forth, and you end up with innocent bystander damage. So your own lung tissue starts to get damaged by the same process that's also protecting you. And one of the consequences, should be a circular arrow around here, one of the consequences of the inflammation is that the secretions, which are already thick, become even thicker. So you end up with, and probably everybody's seen these slides a million times, you end up with obstruction to your airway, a vicious cycle. Obstruction to your airway, that causes infection, that causes inflammation. Inflammation causes further thickening, that causes more obstruction, and round and round and round you go. So part of the thing about coming up with treatments is to interrupt this vicious cycle. Now, there's a new one extra piece that I added in as compared to last year, and that is understanding how the, if we go back to how the gene makes the CFTR in more detail. So basically a gene is DNA, and it's an overall blueprint of making something. You can make the whole body, or you can make brain or whatever, or you can make a chloride channel or whatever out of this blueprint. And the specific process of how that occurs is interesting. So it's a DNA. The DNA is copied by a slightly different substance, RNA, and that you might say is sort of the working blueprint that the construction crew actually takes out to the home building site. So there's the major, you've seen blueprints that are so many pages. And then the working blueprint is just for that one thing. And it's that RNA strand that actually then directs the building of the house, or in this case, directs the building of the chloride channel. And so it kind of goes through this process, and then you end up with the chloride channel. Chloride channel, this all occurs way deep in that cube-like cell that I showed you, travels out to the edge of the cell. This should be, off in the other slide. And you end up with a nice chloride channel right in the membrane. Here's the bronchial tube. You end up with salt coming out here, water coming out here, and nice thin secretions. Or if this is goofed up, you end up with thick secretions because of problems with chloride. Okay, any question about that stuff? Okay. So back to this slide. You're going to see this slide a whole bunch of times in the next few minutes. Any of these steps along the way, at least theoretically and practically, is a target to intervene in the process. And I'm not going to talk about in great detail about most of them, but as I said, the really hot thing in the last several years has been the gene modulators. And of course, the ideal thing, what you would really like to do, and what we will do someday, what we will see, is the gene itself will be fixed. And that's called gene therapy, plain old gene therapy. That solves the whole problem. But if we can't do that, which we can't practically do yet, then the next best thing is to fix the problem that the gene creates somehow. So we're going to end up with an abnormal chloride channel because we have an abnormal blueprint, and then we have to do something with that chloride channel to make it normal, or at least less abnormal, and to somehow work. So this is where so much excitement has been in the last several years. It's fixing the abnormal chloride channel in some way once it's been created in the interior of the cell. What did I just say? Oh, yeah, okay. So how do you do that? How do you fix the chloride channel? Well, now it gets very complicated and very interesting, exciting, but also kind of esoteric. And that is, it depends on exactly what the abnormality of the chloride channel is. So there's 2,000 different CF mutations, give or take. And so all sorts of different things can happen to that chloride channel to make it not work right and not transmit chloride out into the bronchial tube. And this is where, this is the only thing on the newest slide. It's supposed to be 6. So there are 2,000 different mutations, but they can be divided into 6 categories. And that's when, once scientists were able to do that, the gene was found in 1989. I don't think I put that on here. And then they were just overwhelmed by these hundreds and thousands of genes. And when they really started to be able to make progress beyond just identifying the gene was when they divided them up into categories of what's specifically going on inside the cell. So even though this gets really complicated, it also gets really interesting, and it also gets super important. I put that in again. So here are the classes, except for there's a class 6 that will come on the next slide. So the basic concept here is this is a normal situation. You have your DNA blueprint. You make a nice chloride channel. The chloride channel travels on up to the edge of the cell, and there it is. I've already talked about that. But then if you have a certain type of mutation, this is just one example. There are others as well. The DNA is there, and the type of problem, the type of abnormality, the type of mutation in the DNA doesn't even allow that RNA to be made. Remember, I had that little slide where the RNA makes a copy of the DNA, and then the RNA makes the protein. The RNA isn't even made. Well, there's a little tiny segment of RNA, but it basically might as well not be there. So there's no chloride channel at all. The house, they can't even start on the foundation of the house because there's just nothing going on. And so there's no chloride channel up there and no transport at all. Next class is a situation where the DNA makes a full copy of our RNA, copy out of the DNA. Chloride channel is made, but the chloride channel is so abnormal in appearance that there are the mechanisms inside the cell called chaperones. Everybody remembers the concept of chaperone, senior prom and stuff like that. The chaperones look at this and say, this is a very abnormal channel. There's something wrong. Maybe it's going to cause cancer. We've got to do something about it. They rip it apart. And once again, just like the class 1 mutation, There's no chloride channel up there at all, but by a different mechanism. Class 3 is, and this is, by the way, the most common. This is associated with the Delta F508 and some others. Class 3 is a situation where, again, an abnormal channel is made, but the channel doesn't look that abnormal. So when it goes past the chaperones say, well, fine, you can go to the prom. And it goes on up there, and it's sitting up there where it's supposed to, but it's closed. It doesn't open. Chloride can't get through it. So a whole different type of abnormality. Class 4 is kind of similar to that. It gets passed, it goes up there, it's sitting there, but it doesn't transmit chloride very well. I don't think I really understand exactly what's going on with that, but it's slightly different from class 3 in terms of being functionally shut and not allowing chloride to go through. Class 5 is kind of a mixture. There's certain mutations where an abnormal channel is made, plus they don't make enough of it. So maybe you make half as much as you should. It does get up there. There's some, I think it transmits pretty well, but there's just not enough of it there, or at least that's the concept. And probably it's all very much more complicated than this. And then the final class, class 6, is kind of an interesting one. The channel is made, it goes up, it can sit up there, but it doesn't sit there very long, so it keeps leaving the surface. And so functionally, there's not enough there, you don't get enough chloride going across. So each of these kind of very different, even though it's all CF and it's all comes from the mutation in the same area on the gene. And if you're going to think about making a drug to fix this, they're going to be very different kinds of drugs. And that's where, again, this activity in the last several years has come. So this is a slide that it's about a year or two old, and I tried to copy the new one. Dr. Chavez showed me how to do it, but I didn't do it very well. So this is the old one. It's about a year behind or 2 years behind. And it shows you all the different, in this kind of category, gene modulators, things that are being supported by various research organizations, including the CF Foundation, and how far we've come. The first one, the top one, is Kaleido, and Kaleido is relevant to this class 3, where there's a channel, gets past the chaperones, sits up there, but doesn't open. And for various technical reasons, this is where they were first able to make significant progress and come up with a gene modulator that is extremely effective. And so there came Kaleido. It was released in 2012. Initially, it was relevant to people who had about 4% of the CF population had the specific mutation that Kaleido was tested on and proven to work on. That has now been expanded, and we're up to about 8%. So they keep testing all these different sort of more rare mutations. Say, yeah, that kind of fits too. And so we're using Kaleido in about 8% of it, and I assume probably about 8% of our patients. I didn't ask Kendra for that specific figure. This is the one that was approved in the last year for ages 2 and over. And we're very excited about approval to a younger and younger age, regardless of which product this is, because all of these products, no matter how effective they are, do not fix lung damage. They prevent lung damage. And so the earlier we can start in a person's life, the more effective we assume we're going to be. And I think that's obvious. Some specific, I won't go through these details. It's kind of yesterday's news in a sense, but Kaleido is a very effective drug. It improves lung function, it improves weight, it decreases the number of antibiotics that people need. It corrects your sweat chloride to sometimes remarkably normal levels, sometimes borderline normal levels. And it's just a great drug. And I always, when I'm talking to patients, and probably a lot of you have heard this ad nauseum, Kaleido is kind of a home run. So if you fit that category of the 4 to 8% of mutations, it's not quite a cure, but it's very close. I mean, it's incredible. It's a home run. It's just amazing. Now, that's, again, a small number of patients, and a lot of attention was placed on this class, the class 2, because that's a huge number of patients, and there's a great need. In this situation, the task the scientists had to think about was that we've got to do 2 different things. Well, at first, I don't think they knew whether they had to do 1 or 2 different things, but what they had to do was make this very abnormal looking channel invisible to the chaperones, so the chaperones wouldn't rip it up here. So they had to have some kind of medicine to make it by the chaperones so it could get up there to where it's supposed to be. And then once they were able to do that, and a lot of this was test tube research that occurred actually a long time ago, they found that when it got up there, it was also a closed channel, kind of like a class 3 channel. So you had to have a chemical that would help it to get where it needs to go, and then a whole different chemical that helps it to open. And it turns out that the chemical that helps it to open in that situation is Kalydeco. So we already had that one drug. That was cool. But the difficulty was trying to get it protected from the chaperones. And they worked and worked and worked and so on and so forth and put together a study. And this is where Orkambi came from. And ivacaftor is Kalydeco. Lumacaftor is Lumacaftor. So finally they came up with this drug combination through all the studies, so on and so forth, and it was released about almost 3 years, I think August is the anniversary date, or July, so almost 3 years ago for 12 and over. It's now approved for 6 to 11, and there are studies for the younger kids. And it was studied on patients who had the most common combination of all, which is 2 copies of Delta F508, so one from the mother, one from the father, but they're exactly the same mutation. There were a few other mutations studied, but basically this was a study of people who had the 2 copies. And it turns out to be an effective drug, minimal side effects, definite improvement in pulmonary functions, improvement in nutrition, decrease in infections, and so on and so forth. But we were all, to be quite honest, I think everybody would agree, a little disappointed where Kalydeco was a home run. This was like a base hit. And a base hit is good. I mean, it's much better than striking out. But the dramatic benefit of Kalydeco really wasn't seen in these patients. But everything helps, and it's important. We have a bunch of patients on it who are enjoying the benefits of the drug and have enjoyed it for almost 3 years, some longer because we were participating in the study too. One of the neat things, I don't remember the numbers, but I think Kalydeco, off the top of my head, the improvement in FEV1 during the first 18 months or something was near 10, maybe 9% or something like that. And for Orkambi, for this different group of patients, was like 2% or something like that. So 3% sort of sticks out in my mind. So kind of a general comparison, that's home run versus the base hit idea. Now, one of the slightly exciting things is that the drug company Vertex that developed this drug and so many of the others did do ongoing sort of observational studies. So at some point, these become not a placebo-controlled study where somebody's on a sugar pill and somebody else is on the real and so on. So it's not as scientific, but it still provides some scientific data better than just saying, well, how are you feeling now? You've been on Orkambi for a couple of years. Oh, I feel great, or oh, I don't think it's working. So they continued to collect data. And one big question was, if patients on Orkambi experience a 2 to 3% improvement in their FEV1 during the first 18 months, which we know they do because of the study, and they do better than the patients on the sugar pill. Is that all they get? And then for the rest of their life, if they stay on it, is that all they get and they just stay like this? Or the longer they're on it, as compared to somebody who isn't on it at all, does that just start to be cumulative? And they have found some data, and that's what this is showing. If you just got the one initial boost from it and that was it, these lines would be exactly parallel. But over time, at least over a couple of years or so, and hopefully ongoing, there will be accumulating benefits so that your lungs will be stronger and stronger for having started Orkambi as soon as you could. So that's basically about it on Orkambi. I mean, there's much more, but that's what I want. What I'm going to say. At the same time Orkambi was being developed, and again, Orkambi was Kalydeco plus something that protected the channel from the chaperones, there was another drug that was also in development in the test tube, and it was called tezacaftor, and the ivacaftor again is Kalydeco. And early on, there was some information that was sort of put out to the community that tezacaftor looks like a better drug. And they even very early in the studies, they thought about not even developing Orkambi and just developing this drug instead, Symdeko, which is a different combination, but for the same gene mutation. But for various reasons, the other drug was further along and looked good and so on, so they did the studies. But at the same time, they were plodding along with the study of this new combination. And it has now been approved, and it has just come out clinically about 2 months ago. It's called Symdeko or Symdeko, or we don't even know how to say it. I don't know if anybody else knows how to say it. So the basic concept is that this is for the same patients who are on Orkambi or who would benefit from Orkambi, but they also studied a wider variety of patients who had one copy of Delta F508 and one other kind of mutation. And they found some very broad differences in how it worked depending upon what your mutation was. Now, unfortunately, and I'm one of the worst perpetrators of this, the impression kind of got out there that Symdeko was going to be dramatically more beneficial than Orkambi for everybody. And so I've been telling patients for a year, and I'm sure some of them are in this room right now, that this is going to be great. As soon as Symdeko comes out, we're going to switch you from Orkambi to Symdeko, and you're going to do even better. Well, it wasn't quite like that. And once the data came out, it turns out that if you have 2 copies of Delta F508, as far as we know, and you have to emphasize that because nobody's studied the 2 drugs against each other yet. So we're just saying, well, this drug as compared to sugar pill, this drug as compared to sugar pill. So if it's like that, then this drug probably would be about like this as compared to each other. Those studies haven't been done, so we don't know. It may turn out to be a bit more effective. But from what we can tell from the data, Symdeko for people who have 2 copies of Delta F508 is about the same as Orkambi. It's not worse, and there are certain advantages. I'll go over on the next slide. But if you have certain other mutation combinations, it does turn out to be probably dramatically more beneficial. So we're now going through like who's going to benefit from changing, who isn't going to benefit from changing, who wants to change, so on. And some of you have had this conversation with one of us providers in the exam room. It taught me some healthy skepticism about, here what people say, oh, this is going to be the greatest drug that ever came along. It also, back to my thoughts about teamwork, I mean, this is incredibly complicated stuff, and to have in particular Kendra and Lindsay pouring through all this information and keeping up, I can't read all this stuff, and saying, well, it doesn't really look that different from, so on and so forth. So it's really helpful to have a supportive team. Again, it's a perfect example. The other kind of lesson, this may be a confusing last statement, but when you have that picture of class 1, 2, 3, 4, you would think, well, okay, we're just going to have this drug, and to whatever extent it's effective, we know exactly who it's going to be effective for. It's looking like as they get further into these modulator studies, that some of it you just have to test and see. You can't totally predict who's going to benefit dramatically and who's going to benefit a little bit. Okay, so there is. So anyway, now this drug is approved 12 and over and for a variety of mutations. There are some advantages of Symdeko over Orkambi for at least some patients. There are less drug interactions with some particular medications. And we had one patient who really ran into tremendous trouble who was on an acid blocker like Prevacid or something like that. Maybe it was Prevacid. For a variety of reasons, including reflux, heartburn, and so on. And when he started on Orkambi interfered with the action of that acid blocker, and he ended up with a bleeding ulcer, and it was a big mess. And he did great. But Symdeko doesn't have that interaction. Orkambi interacts with hormonal birth control, where Symdeko doesn't. And one of the interesting things is that Orkambi, and some of you in this room may know this from firsthand experience, about a third of patients who start Orkambi get a peculiar kind of shortness of breath as a side effect from the drug. And a lot of times it's mild, lasts a couple of weeks and goes away, and it's fine. but particularly if you have very significant lung disease, that shortness of breath may be so severe that you basically can't take the drug. And we've had patients start it, stop it, start it, stop it. They just could never get used to it because they were tremendously short of breath. The new replacement drug, so to speak, does not have the shortness of breath. So we're in the process of trying to start a couple of our patients who never could get used to Orkambi on Symdeko, and at least we know they're not going to have shortness of breath, and maybe it'll work for them. That's those three drugs now that are on the market, and fourth line should say on the market. Now coming along, the newest thing is 3 drug combinations. So we have one drug combination, one single drug. We have two drug combinations. Now they're coming up with 3 drug combinations, and the 3 drug combinations, and that's what Dr. Chavez is starting up on the multi-center study that's just starting up now. And I think some of these numbers are a little bit different, and there's several different candidate drugs, but it doesn't really matter what the numbers are. They basically are for, and I should have iterated, it gets very complicated, but they are in the same general type of category as Orkambi and Kalydeco, where they're particularly aimed at that Delta F508 mutation, but then they're going to study people who have that and one other mutation, and the anticipation is that these are going to be significantly more effective than what we already have. Now, remember, that's what they also, or I thought they were also telling us about the other drugs, so I'm being a little skeptical, but the preliminary data looks really amazing, and Dr. Chavez well, I don't know if you're going to talk about something else today, but anyway, we're really excited about these drugs coming along and other drugs, and there are other multiple different molecules that they'll put in combination, and that's where the CF Foundation comes up with its statement that in the very near future, in the next few years, we should have drugs that help at least 90% of CF patients. That's wonderful. And then a last little reminder, these are all Vertex drugs. Vertex is a great company, but it's not the only game in town. And just last week, the FDA granted fast track status to a different company, Proteostasis, has been around for a while. They have a different 3-drug combination. I don't know anything about it, but I think it's somewhere in the same ballpark. So I say the more the merrier, everybody working on this stuff, it's just really great and very exciting. Okay, that's it on the gene modulators. Any questions or comments? I mean, there's a lot of material, very complicated. Go ahead.
Where do nonsense?
Well, that has been the real disappointment because, oops, going the wrong way. So the question is about nonsense mutations, which is class 1, where there's no RNA made and animal made. And a few years ago, I think it just ended like a year ago, a year and a half ago or so, there was a very exciting, it looked like very exciting drug, Adalurin, that was coming along. It was a gene modulator that was going to apply to that class. And it just didn't work out, unfortunately. And right now, I don't know if there's any candidates, way back in the test tubes, but there's nothing that's on the intermediate or immediate horizon for the class 1s. So there's a few different approaches that are being looked at for that. One is, I'm sure they're still trying madly to find something like Adalurin that does work, but I don't think that's coming along well at this point. The second is if you can make most people with nonsense mutation have a Delta F508 plus a nonsense mutation. That'd be the common combination. So if you can enhance that Delta F508 not just a little bit, like Orkambi, but a ton, like maybe these 3-drug combinations will do, then the nonsense mutation becomes less and less important because the Delta F508 can get to work and open, and even though it's not perfect, it works quite well. And that's the hope of these 3-drug combinations. And then the other thing is to go into some gene things that I'll mention in. I don't think so. No, because that's on this picture somewhere. Adalurin was that third one that has a different color than you see the X. They just didn't show efficacy. I think that's a different color. VX is Vertex. products are called that. So I think that was a different company. So yeah, that's been a disappointment, but they're really coming up with creative ways, and the 3-drug combinations hopefully will significantly address that, such that if you have one delta F508, then you'd rather have a delta F508 and G551D or something. But even if you have a delta F508 and a nonsense mutation, you're still going to get pretty good efficacy. That's the hope. Great question. Anybody else? Okay, so let's, if I can find some of these things I'm not going to really talk very much, but just to make the point. So we're talking about fixing the gene. Haven't talked about that yet. We talked about fixing the problem that the gene creates. Talked about a lot. But there's other approaches too. I mean, there's all sorts of things that you can think about doing and have been thought about for a long time. One is don't change the channel or anything, but somehow fix the problem of the thickened secretions. And that's drugs that are yesterday's news, but in a good way. I don't mean to dismiss them at all. My favorite drug, probably of all, is Dornase. Been around for a long time. It's a nice mucus thinner, hypertonic saline. Kind of very temporarily, right as you take it, sort of fixes the problem with abnormal salt, because it puts a bunch of salt right there, draws water, thins the secretions, allow you to cough out secretions. Very effective. Mannitol is coming along. Mannitol is a drug used for other medical conditions, so it's readily available, but they're studying in CF and F for a long time, and I don't know if it's going to be more effective than hypertonic saline, but it's the same kind of idea. Then remember the picture about the chloride channels and then the sodium. So chloride, the problem is the chloride channel, but also too much sodium comes in. So a whole other approach is forget about the chloride channel and just keep more sodium from coming in, and that will help to improve. And there's 3 at least on this thing, 3 ENaC is the sodium channel and things that block so much sodium from going through there. So I don't have any information on those, and I just wanted to illustrate the point is that they're working on ways to thin the secretions, even if you couldn't ever change the gene or the gene product. You can also deal with inflammation, because remember, inflammation is a very good thing because it fights infection, but it also creates lung damage and increases the thickness of the secretions. And a variety of different kinds of anti-inflammatories have been used through the years. Again, I don't even want to address these just for time, and I want to talk about some other things. But various kinds of novel and old anti-inflammatories are used in various contexts to try to shut down. And one of the points here is that you don't want to totally shut down the inflammatory system, because then you have infection that gets out of control. So we're trying to dampen it down very subtly and with all sorts of different products. Another thing, very important and a huge part of all of our lives every day, is fighting infection. And I went to actually a workshop at the CF conference last fall that I thought was going to be, it's going to be kind of boring, because the real activity is in the modulators, but it was an antibiotic review, and it was really good, and it was one that I didn't fall asleep in. And it was very cool, and I just tried to summarize a couple things from it, because antibiotics are, again, still important. There's been a lot of talk, not just in CF, but sort of in the general media and so on, really over the last many years, that we're approaching the post-antibiotic era. Basically, that we're having superbacteria arise that we have no antibiotics for, and we're either stuck and at the mercy of these microbes, or we're going to have to come up with whole new approaches. But it's been very pessimistic in the last several years. And I didn't realize that some of these things, this next statement, the next 2 statements are very interesting and somewhat optimistic. So, in terms of new antibiotics being invented, the peak of new products reaching market was actually in the 1950s. I was a little kid. And in the 1960s, that tremendously slowed. And then and here I want to differentiate between classes of antibiotics and antibiotics. So there's families of antibiotics that have similar chemical structures, like all the penicillin classes, and then the cephalosporins like Omnicef or that kind of thing, or ceftazidime, and they're kind of cousins to the penicillin. So that's kind of a big family. Then there's the quinolones, Cipro and Levaquin. Most people are familiar with Cipro. Aminoglycosides, which is tobramycin and gentamicin and some others. So that's like what a family is. So between 1968 and 2018, 50 years, only 3 new classes of antibiotics were invented. Quinolones were one, and I can't remember what the others were. And that's shocking. I mean, that's really like post-antibiotic era. But now, for whatever reason, advances it looks like we're on a big escalation phase, as we were before 50 years ago. Right now, there's 40 new not new antibiotic classes, but 40 new antibiotics that are in clinical development right now, and could reach market. Now, and they gave some statistics I didn't write down, so I've immediately forgotten. I think something like 1 in 5 antibiotics that fits that ever reaches the market. But I mean, still, that's a ton of new antibiotics, so very exciting. And 11 new drug classes in development right now. So hope for the future that we're not running out of antibiotics, basically, as we try to ultimately solve the gene puzzle. But in addition to antibiotics, and here I am sort of a little bit struggling for a definition. I don't really know if I know the precise. Antibiotics were originally, the first antibiotic ever discovered came out of funguses. Basically, they're natural products made by microbes to defeat other microbes. And I think that's sort of the original definition of antibiotic. And then how you define it, does anybody know? I don't know exactly, so I should have looked that up. But antibiotics are sort of what we all think of as, again, Cipro and tobramycin and Keflex and all these things. And they have various ways of defeating bacteria. But outside of that are things that wouldn't even fit whatever that category is or whatever that definition is, but still kill microbes. And one very interesting one is gallium. Now, gallium is a chemical element, kind of like iron. It's sort of, I guess, in the category of a metal. And it's been used in medicine for a long time as a dye for doing some nuclear medicine studies to see if you have an abscess or something like that, called a gallium scan. So again, it's something that's readily available on the shelf, but not used as an antibiotic. Well, it turns out bacteria need iron for many of their life process, to stay alive and to reproduce and all this stuff. And they don't need gallium, and they don't do well with gallium, and gallium replaces iron. So if you somehow get gallium into somewhere where there's an infection, such as a cystic fibrosis patient, it will replace the iron, and the bacteria get all messed up, and they can't replicate, and they die, and so on and so forth. University of Washington is running phase 3 trials now, and they presented the data at this conference that I went to. And it's a 3-day intravenous infusion, which is kind of daunting. They just run it continuously for 3 days. And what that would translate into in terms of clinical treatment, I mean, that's, I don't know what form it would take, but basically they showed tremendous efficacy in killing bacteria. And again, since bacteria infection creates inflammation, and inflammation creates problems, in a sense, this becomes anti-inflammatory, not because it's an anti-inflammatory drug, but because it decreases infection and that decreases inflammation and so on. Low incidence of side effects, even though they're running this weird chemical into your veins for 3 days. And so where that goes, I don't know, but they're very excited about it. And they're starting to work on inhaled gallium as an alternative to that. So like inhaled antibiotics instead of oral or IV antibiotics. So that's one exciting. And another thing, I hadn't heard this in years. I remember when years ago lecturing to medical students, probably, I remember 20 or 25 years ago, there was something called defensins that they had discovered. And defensins are, and they didn't use this, I guess that's just one example, but they have known about in nature for a long time and discovered a ton of them now, over 5,000 simple protein molecules that are destructive to bacteria. Apparently every living creature, I guess you'd say, whether it's a simple mold, bacteria, people, tigers, whatever, have antimicrobial peptides, and it's part of what they call the innate immune system. So, as a sort of quick and dirty definition of that, part of our immune system, it goes way back probably in evolution, and so again, amoebas and everybody have some innate immunity, I guess. It's non-specific immunity, so there's a good and a bad about that. And what that means is it will help you fight infection even if you've never seen that organism before. So you get exposed to strep, let's say a strep throat. You don't have any antibodies against strep because your body's never seen strep before. You don't have any chance of having made antibodies, but there are some very simple things in your innate immunity that can, to an extent, help you to kill the strep so it won't kill you. And that's the good thing, is it's there and it's ready-made even if you've never run into plague or whatever. The bad thing is it remains nonspecific. So that means every time you're exposed to strep, these things can attack the strep, but they have no memory that you were ever, so it's like starting all over again. So it's not a super effective part of your immunity, but it is an important part of your immunity. And these protein molecules, or these peptide molecules, are only part of it. There are a whole bunch of other parts of your innate immunity as well. Anyway, the natural peptides, they found over 5,000 of them. They're very specific for certain types of environments and certain types of bacteria and so on and so forth. And so they won't kill everything. But now they're starting to engineer peptides like this, make some laboratory that have certain specifications, such as a broader spectrum, can kill more different kinds of bacteria, and they can also operate in different kinds of environments. And as everybody knows, CF lungs, let's say, have some unique and difficult aspects of their environment. For one thing, there's more acid nature to the secretions in CF lungs than in non-CF lungs. As we already know, there's a different amount of salt content and water content. And then as compared to certain other kinds of infection situations, like maybe someone with immunodeficiency, there tend to be a lot more different bacteria in the lungs at any given time. So those create some specific problems, but targets for developing products that could solve those problems. So people are once again excited after years of, I don't know what happened to them, are now getting excited again about antimicrobial peptides. There's concerns, as there would be with anything, about whether this could also, one of the things these peptides do is poke a hole in the membrane of a bacteria, and stuff leaks out and the bacteria dies, but can it poke a hole in your lung cells too, and so on and so forth. So different kinds of things. And then finally, this isn't exactly a new antibiotic, but an important thing that we worry about. They are working on either developing new products or taking old products and using them in a new way to try to decrease the toxicity of drugs that we use, in particular tobramycin, which is a very important drug for us in the CF world. And tobramycin has two main side effects we worry about. One is it can cause kidney damage, and the other is it can cause ear damage, including hearing damage. And so research is now being done to use other drugs to try to prevent, to sort of block the side effects without blocking the good effect of the antibiotic. And, you know, when we tell you that, oh gosh, your Pseudomonas has now become resistant to tobramycin or Cipro or whatever, one of the things that we mean by that is it's possible that if we could hit this bacteria with a huge nuclear bomb full of tobramycin, it would kill the bacteria, but it would also cause you so much damage that you don't want to, you know, have that drug. If we could use higher doses of tobramycin and prevent side effects, then your bacteria, in a sense, is no longer resistant. So, anyway, another whole approach to treating infections. So that was, in a nutshell, the workshop that I went to that I didn't fall asleep in. Okay, now back to this deal, and now I'm getting close to the end. So again, if our holy grail is to fix the gene itself, and we talk so much about fixing the abnormality that the gene causes, there's a step before that, there's a step between that, and that is back to this picture. So the mutation is in the DNA. The DNA makes a copy of the RNA, the working blueprint that then has a defect in it, so you're going to build a defective house. A novel approach is that, well, what if you don't change the DNA, but you change the RNA that has the abnormality in it, and change that into a nice normal working blueprint, and then you can make a normal gene product. And there is a drug that's being tested in University of Washington, very early phase. University of Washington was involved in multi-center study on this called QR010. And that's exactly what that does, is to forget about the abnormality in DNA, look at the abnormality RNA, try to change it. And those studies are still coming along, very preliminary, but another exciting approach. And then the last thing is actually gene therapy itself, fixing the gene. And I'm just going to very briefly go over this. So the gene was discovered in 1989. Within a year, they actually were able to do effective gene therapy, first in a test tube, then actually in a human being in various ways. But they've run into problems ever since, and they're still trying to work on the problems. And the concept that was used was to take a respiratory virus. Why a respiratory virus? Well, respiratory viruses love to attack lung cells, and they love to insert their own DNA or RNA into lung cells and take over, they kind of commandeer that lung cell and do what they want with it and multiply and so on and so forth and cause all sorts of damage and then move along the lung cell. And there's a very common and in some cases very destructive virus called adenovirus that is very effective in doing what I just said. So the initial gene therapy in the test tube in CF took an adenovirus. They took some of the DNA out. They put in its place, and they took some DNA out so that it wouldn't attack lung cells so aggressively. It had to attack the lung cell in order to get the gene that we want in, but if you don't want to destroy the lung cell, then there's no point in getting the new gene in because the lung cell is destroyed. So they kind of disarmed it, but it was still capable of putting DNA into the lung cell, and then they put the normal gene in, and lo and behold, it worked. They call it like a Trojan horse. The problem is that you have to do this every 2 or 3 months because new lung cells come along, and after a while, your body's immune system says, "Hey, we don't want this Trojan horse. This is a foreign body, and we've got to get rid of it." And it didn't work. So they've been struggling with that kind of thing ever since. But they're continuing to struggle. That's the nice thing. And various other kinds of viruses have been tried. There is another virus called adeno-associated virus. It's a smaller virus than adenovirus and has certain, I guess, advantages and disadvantages for this purpose, but it's still a strong candidate. And there's a company, 4D Molecular Therapeutics, that just 6 months ago was awarded $3 million by the CF Foundation for ongoing research in that. Other viruses, some classes called retroviruses that have certain problems but are very efficient transferers of DNA. And then this, partly I like this just because I think that British is just wonderful descriptive language. So instead of phase 1 or what, they had wave 1, the UK Gene Consortium, and this last year was pretty hot at the time. There is a non-viral particle called a liposome. It's basically some kind of a fat globule that works to an extent to transfer genetic material. And so it could be used for gene therapy in the way that I've talked about. And these studies were coming along in the United Kingdom and in Europe, and it looked like, well, this is going to be pretty good. It looks like, sort of reading between the lines, that it turned out to be sort of underwhelming, like it kind of works, but doesn't work well enough to really make a big difference. And so now they have wave 2, and they're using a different virus called lentiviruses, which were also talked about years ago, but are now apparently in the transcendence, at least there. So I don't know how all these things are going to turn out, but there continues to be optimism that ultimately the gene therapy puzzle will be solved, and all these other things that we do along the way that are so important will eventually no longer be necessary. Oh yeah, I don't know if I wanted to. Am I almost out of time, Kendra? Kendra's going to take a nap somewhere. Okay, I'm almost out of time. Okay. Okay, well, this is just almost more for fun than anything else. I presented this slide last year. Scientists discovered in strep throat bacteria a kind of a defense system that they had. You know, bacteria are at risk of being attacked by other microbes as well, and viruses can attack bacteria and do bad things to them and so on. So strep bacteria have a system, and other systems, and now they found in other places as well, where they can learn to recognize the DNA of an incoming virus and do various things to defeat it. Those little arrays that they build that help them to discover that help them to defend themselves against it by recognizing, hey, this is a foreign object, it's a foreign virus, apparently have a very interesting sequence, and it's called clustered regularly interspaced palindromic repeats. And some of you will remember from last, I had to remember what a palindrome was, but a palindrome are those fun phrases that read the same backwards and forwards, like do ye see God. At any rate, the point is that what they are working on now is that you can make a little segment of this is RNA that then can detect an abnormality on DNA, cut it out, like just snip it out and put something else in there. So this becomes coupled with the kind of gene therapy that I was talking about, like if you take a virus like adenovirus and use this system, the CRISPR-Cas9, it may be the way that that they will be able to go in and fix and put the normal gene in. And there's a company called Editas, which is a major developer of this system for this purpose. So, anyway, that's pretty much what I had. Now, questions, comments, and everything else. Yes?
About the CRISPR. How do you?
As usual, you know more about this than I do. I think you do. No, I don't have any update. They had kind of, this was big news at 2 years ago conference, and I thought it kind of just, and some of the interesting, some of the drug reps, you go to these little parties or something, and they say, well, they have so many problems with that. That's never going to, and you don't even know which company they're from, but they're probably from the competitors or something. But so I thought it all died. But if you go online, I mean, they're still talking about this, and particularly, I can't remember if I had which virus, but one of those viral models, I don't know if it was the AAV or the lentivirus, I think it now becomes part of that. So maybe they figured something out about it. Yeah, I don't know, but as usual, you have a wonderful question. Yes?
So I was
Yeah, I think it's probably too early to know that. My guess is probably it could have, if it continues to be effective and safe, that it could probably have both roles. When they first came out with the inhaled antibiotics, their main purpose was preventive and suppression of growth rather than treating an infection. But we've all used them tons for treating infections. I mean, and once they're out there, you can use them for anything you want, really. My guess is they could have a dual role. Anybody else? All right, thank you very much.
So we're going to get set up with our next speaker. We have a guest speaker coming in to talk about insurance, which I think is a very important topic for all of us. So while we're getting set up, though, again, if there's any seating changes you want to do, this is a good time. I'm going to do a couple of the door prizes. If you have not gotten your tickets in, we'll do many. We have a lot of door prizes. So pretty much find what you like, put the tickets in, and then one prize per person. So the first one is going to be for the first yoga package, Cassie Atwood.
Are you next to the? Oh, okay. Which one is it?
Okay, and the second yoga package. Mary Swenson.
Keyston? Okay, got it. Thanks. No, no worries. Yeah. I don't know. That, I think you, and then you'll just advance that button. And then if you stand in this.
All right, and then we're going to do the tea time bath and teas.
Or, I mean, look anywhere, but just. So we see the cameras. And then it's just.
And if you haven't gotten tickets, you've never had a chance to do them, raise your hand.
You can use it.
And Nicole will bring those around.
Thanks.
3 links for the bath package. All right, so that's all for the door prizes now. We have lots and lots, so we'll get going with that later. And then for now, we'll just have Debbie start. Thank you so much for coming. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Debbie Benitez, and I'm actually from Los Angeles. I actually like the gloomy, cool weather, so I'm happy to be here, leaving my 84-degree sunny. Boo, right? Who needs vitamin D? Who needs vitamin D? So anyway, I'm coming from the Adult CF Center at USC in Los Angeles, and so I primarily take care of adults. So obviously, I know you are all both mixed peds and adults. So I'm really excited to be able to meet with some of the families because I want you to know that in the adult world, parents come all the time. And I love it, actually. I feel that those adults who have great family support do really well. And their care for that transition time, there's a lot. And it's hard for young adults to learn and be savvy about CF care and the independence of insurance or even those various milestones that happen as young adults, like getting your first job after you graduate, picking your insurance plan. There's so many complexities in the young adult world. So I think it's fabulous that families can still be a part of their lives thereafter. So I wanted to give you those encouraging words because I know a lot of people walk around to tell me that, oh no, when you go to the adult world, parents aren't invited anymore. And that is not true. We welcome families all the time. So I'm sure your care team over here agrees with me about being invited to come and participate when you transition over. So today, really, I'm going to be talking about kind of building your IQ for insurance. I think insurance is probably the hardest thing for both patients and families and even healthcare teams. Because when we went to school, we didn't really learn about insurance until we got to our job and we had to figure out, yeah, I'm going to prescribe a medication or a test or admit someone to the hospital. And all of a sudden, there are barriers to doing what we do and what we love. So it's even more complex for those of you in this room who have to be a part of someone's life who is sick and needs medications and needs to be admitted. So it's really important that we all understand kind of the basics of insurance and what that means. Now, I'll be the first to say that I am not an insurance expert, and I'm not here to be one, but I'm here to kind of give you some common terminology terms to explain what some of this stuff means if you haven't already come across some of these terms, and kind of learn from you about what kind of are the barriers and challenges you experience here at your center, and then maybe talk with you about how you can partner with your care team and key people on the team who might be able to help you navigate through those difficulties. So this talk is really not meant to be like a lecture, although there are pieces of this that are reviewing terms, but really part of it is also for you to be interactive and share kind of the barriers you have. So all of you received these workbooks. So hopefully when we get to those pieces, then I'll tell you to open them up, and we're going to work through some of these vignettes that are part of this deck. All right, let's get going. So some of the topics that we're going to be reviewing today is, we're going to just overview really briefly kind of the landscape of the health insurance world, which, it's very complex, and a lot of us encounter many of these challenges, and it's even more difficult for patients and families. So that's why we're going to talk about this today. Secondly, we're going to talk about the basics of health insurance, review some terminology so you have some familiarity. And then we're going to be talking a little bit about what's the difference, right, between government insurance versus private insurance, because those are also different. And then we'll be talking about how to build that partnership with the care team, with resources that might be available to you so that you can harness some of that information to help you with CF care. And then lastly, we're going to hopefully be able to share amongst each other, and even maybe from your care team, as well as what I've seen, some of the best practices. What are some things that we're doing to kind of help each other navigate through these barriers? So first, obviously, we know there are challenges to some of that insurance puts in the way of what we provide for CF care, both as clinicians and also as patients and families, right? We think it's really simple to go refill a prescription, but there's like 4 other things that need to happen before we can even get the medication, right? So I know many people go through those challenges. So again, today, really, we want it to be interactive, right? So the first thing that we want to do is kind of harness from all of you today, what are some of these challenges that you're facing with insurance, and how does that get in the way of giving your loved one CF, care, right? Whether it's services or medications. So hopefully nobody is shy at 11:40 and can start yelling some things out so we can all hear what those are. Absolutely. That's a big one. And I think as care teams, we come across that too, right? Because they've never heard of CF. They are asking us, well, they have these, what I call standardized questions, right? So sometimes with certain meds, I'll even say, does your patient have CF? Yes, they were born with it. I did this review a year ago and for the last 5 years. So yes, you're right. I think that's a big one, is you're just talking to this person who doesn't care and doesn't know and is not informed about the disease or the type of specialty meds that we prescribe. What else?
The uncertainty from your what's going to be covered, how much is going to be covered, what the like you go to school every year.
Absolutely. I'm starting to find that insurance is really a life skill, right?
You spend a lot of time on it.
Tons of time. And I would have to say that care teams spend a lot of time too, because It's new. Like you said, every year as you enroll, right? What used to be covered last year, now it's a whole different process this year. And what you thought you signed up for was the same plan. The coverage has changed even on prescription benefits, right? So it's a big one. And what before you probably needed not to do what we call pre-certifications, now we got to do them this year. So it changes the way we have to partner together. It's a great one. I saw a hand over here.
Why is that? Yeah. Medicaid for 10 years.
Yeah.
So, and problem. Gotten some.
It is, and it's a lot to track.
Yeah.
And especially if you have two with CF that both need meds, right? Sometimes it's not even the same time that you're asking for them. So trying to figure out, okay, did we do it for her? Did we do it for him? And was it last month? Do we do it this month? Super complex. So if you can imagine, right, then going back to the team, like, okay, this is for her, this is for him, and it needs to be here, and you go to this pharmacy. And then sometimes even when we're working with you, it's even complex for us to talk to someone again, like you said, and try to figure out where it should go and when it should go. I think it's hard. It's hard, and it's even becoming more complex as each year goes by. And I think now with these specialty pharmacies, right? Some pharmacies only give certain meds, some pharmacies don't, right? No, that med can't go to a regular pharmacy in your neighborhood. It's got to go to the mail order, right? So even just keeping track of that is super hard. So I think those are great challenges, and we're going to be talking about some of those ways to maneuver those things.
But the second thing that we see a lot is our primary and the primary will say we only classification and then criteria.
Oh yeah, yeah. And now with these new gene therapy meds that we heard, it's even going to be more complex. And as these new therapies, right? Everyone's like, oh gosh, why would they just give my kid the drug? I know, and we say the same thing when we're calling them. Nothing has changed. We've been talking about this for 30 years. Who do we need to speak to make this happen? So I think this is where a lot of you can participate in some of those advocacy days. I don't know if your state does that with the CF Foundation local chapter or through the CF Foundation, but uh-oh. Oh, there's a password. So, I was fortunate enough to go to the Advocacy Day in California, and I can't begin to tell you how important it is if you are not already advocating for your child, but also for your state to be on board with kind of these issues that we're addressing with CF Care. And just to highlight briefly is I met with some legislative person in California, and he was clueless about, he didn't even know what CF was. He didn't understand why we would have to fight for certain meds and repeat that this person had CF and they've been born with this disease and they were 40 years old. So I think it's good if you have the chance and opportunity to be a part of those, to do that and advocate for your child and share your story. I think that's one of the key things the foundation is moving towards, is getting care centers and family members and adult CF people to go and share your story and talk about the complexity of their disease and how it relates to kind of some of these rules and regulations and laws and policies that affect their day-to-day care. So I encourage you to do that. Are there any other challenges that someone would like to address before we? Oh, great. There's more.
Our insurance accepts security. Our employer has.
No, that's actually coming through the pipeline. The foundation's been getting a lot of calls about private insurance payers that are no longer allowed